I don't remember now, and I'm not even sure I knew then why my first grade teacher decided to separate me from the rest of the class and put me behind that trifold barrier by myself. I'm not sure what I did to upset her. What I do know is what I did after she separated me. I grabbed all of my paper out of my book bag, all of my assignments that were probably not finished, anything that was around me, and I cut them all into very thin strips. And I carefully glued them together into rings and eventually into a chain. And I had enough time to actually put that chain carefully onto that divider. I wasn't trying to upset her any more than I already had. I was just curious. I was really curious about the transformation of paper, about transforming what was this rectangle into this 10-foot chain. I liked the way that it rustled, the way it felt, the way I transformed it when I put it up. My curiosities caused a lot of problems for me in the classroom for many years. It wasn't until actually fourth grade, when I repeated fourth grade, that something clicked. I'm not sure what it was. I'm not sure why. But it was at that point that I realized that my unwillingness to participate in the system that was the classroom or the school was not only causing myself mental anguish or strife, but it was also causing my family problems, and it was time that I participated. I didn't let go of my curiosities. I still drew in my notebook. I kept my curiosities at home or in my book bag. I took things apart, put them back together, but I didn't bring those into the classroom. I began to actually take apart the system that was the classroom. I began to understand that there were patterns that were in the classroom, that were in the textbooks and in the ways that the school was structured, that the math book had examples at the beginning of each chapter, and the odd answers were in the back, but using those and what the teacher was talking about, I could produce the right answer. In Spanish, the same thing. 4 years of Spanish and straight A's. I can't speak Spanish today. It wasn't until I got to college, a liberal arts college, and it was my choice to go to this college, interesting enough. And it wasn't until I got there that I realized that my passions, those things that I liked to do at home, that I had to kind of put away into my book bag, that they belonged in the classroom, in my education. 25 years later, and I'm still in the classroom. Now I'm an art teacher, a high school art teacher. And I try to bring those curiosities that I had, or not my personal curiosities, but those curiosities of the students into the classroom, and it's not always easy. When I first started teaching, I basically said, you can do whatever you want. Bring it into the classroom, let's do this. And there was a little bit of excitement on their faces, but there was some strange looks like, I don't know what to do. So there was some interesting work created, but there wasn't any depth to it. So then I realized, I was like, okay, I need some structure here. I need to put some structure in place. But then everything that they produced was exactly what I had taught them. And I'm like, what do I do? And I began to realize that it wasn't about total freedom, and it wasn't about having total structure, that it was a dance between the two. I began to think of it as a figure eight that needs to move back and forth. That at times I need to offer a place where, yes, that there's some structure where I teach some very specific skills, but then those skills need to be brought back into that place of passion, those curiosities. And again, bring those curiosities back into those skills, continually feeding one another. It's not always easy, though. I do a few different things in my classroom that at first don't look very complex, and they're not very complex, but each trying to get those curiosities out of my students into the work. One of those is I will assign drawing quite often, 45 minutes of drawing. And the kids are pretty excited because when they go home, they can tell their parents, I have to draw, it's homework. But the goal of this assignment is for them to have an opportunity that is set aside for them to explore those curiosities. I had one student, Sam, bring back his homework, and I came around, and usually I have them write down how long they worked on their homework. and he hadn't done this. I said, Sam, how long did you work on this? And I'll be honest, at first glance, I thought it was about 10 or 15 minutes. And he said 47 minutes. And I said, well, so then I sat down and I said, tell me more about it. And he says, this is a picture of me, and it was sort of a stick figure, to be honest, and a bunch of lines coming through it. And he says, this is a picture of me. Last night I got out of Taekwondo and I started to think about how those movements, those actions of me in my Taekwondo class still resided inside of me after I left the class. And then when I went home, he said, and I went to compose music. I'm not done with the music yet, but when I began to compose the music, I realized that that was influencing my music. And that's what he had drawn. Too often, we assign homework and we bring that structure of the school back into the home. When really what we need to be doing is bringing those curiosities and those interests and those passions, that fire in the belly that we do on our own time, we need to bring those back into the school. I had another student recently say, he didn't say anything, actually he was sitting there, and I came up and I said, what are you working on? He's like, nothing, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, what do you like to work on at home? He says, I like to bake. I said, why don't you bring that into the classroom? Why don't you bring some of that back into the classroom? He says, I can't bake at school. I'm like, I know you can't bake at school, but you can begin to think about the form of the cake, the color. So then I gave him some cardboard. And interestingly enough, it was similar. I started thinking back to those chains I had made out of that paper and transforming them. And I began to show him how you can take flat cardboard, you can score it, and you can form these amazing shapes that go beyond any mold you can buy at the store for a cake. Then you can take joint compound, plaster essentially, mix a little bit of watercolor in there, put that on top. It's going to look so good you're going to want to eat it. The theme of all of these talks that we're hearing today is youth, stay curious. Now earlier, everybody raised their hands indicating that they've been in school or are currently in school, which means to me that there resides within you, which means you're a child, which means which resides inside of you is some youth still. So it's not just youth, if you're this tall, stay curious. It's youth, everybody stay curious. And what do we do to help keep ourselves curious? First is you talk about your curiosities. At first, it won't seem as if anybody's listening, perhaps. And it's true, it takes two to tango. But I'll tell you what, it only takes one to dance. And before you know it, it'll catch on. There may be somebody sitting right next to you who is just as curious as you are about something. There is a quote or a saying amongst those who work with plants that a weed is a beautiful plant that is in the wrong place. Your curiosities have a place. Find that place. Make that place.